Here on a record day for the S&P and the NASDAQ.
Unbelievable. It feels like it's been a painful trade, right? Like, I don't know. I want to hear what Jay Powell has to say tomorrow. I want to see what the jobs report. We're kind of getting back to some of the fundamentals and policy. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to at this point.
That's kind of all there is now that earnings are. We're kind of done with earnings. I don't want to say we're completely done because we never are.
We have a few more today, yeah.
We do. We talked to Stuart Paul, who's a lot more optimistic about the October and about the November labor numbers than payroll numbers than we saw in October. Because of the strikes being over, people being rehired after the hurricane. He's thinking 175,000 people.
Well, we'll see, because, of course, October was pretty messy because of all the weather events. I don't know about you guys, but I was fascinated by the drama that took place in South Korea, where there was martial law for almost 6 hours until they lifted it. And that kind of sets us up for tomorrow, where there's going to be drama in France, too.
Yeah, and sort of how do you wind up pricing that, right? Like, you could some of the iShares ETFs that track South Korean equities. You definitely saw them low, but they're closing well off the lows of the session as we're looking at, again, record highs for the S&P 55, if you're keeping count, and the NASDAQ 100.
And it raises the whole question here about why you're not seeing a little bit more downside hedging here in the U.S. And really, we should point out globally, because when we talk about the record highs, a potential 55th record high here on the S&P 500, you have the MSCI All-World Index also closing at a record high today, of course, propelled in big part by U.S. exceptionalism, a big part by the Mag 7. 60, 49, and change. It takes a while for these numbers to settle. The S&P 500 is now up a fraction of 0.1% on the day, but that is going to be good enough for a record high, should that hold. The NASDAQ also at a record high, up about 77 points or 0.4%. The Dow Jones and the Russell sitting this one out. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down about 0.2%, while the Russell 2000 closing out the day down 0.7%.
All right, and if you go deeper into the S&P 500, you can see that most names in the index actually lower in today's session. Looking forward to seeing the IMAP. But Scarlett, we've got about 348 names in the S&P 500, lower today, 153 to the upside.
Yeah, 8 out of 11 sectors in the red: utilities, financials, and industrials leading the declines. The 3 sectors that are in the green are, the techie sectors: communication services, tech itself, and consumer discretionary.
All right, so let's get to some of the individual gainers, guys. First of all, old time, AT&T. This name was among your top gainers.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you?
Yes,
We're expecting
please.
earnings out of Salesforce. Those numbers now just crossing the wire as we speak. Let's get right to it. Sales in the most recent quarter, it looks like it beat $2.12 billion. The street was looking for 2.06. Services revenue also a beat at $2.29 billion. Overall revenue coming in at about 9.44. That's also a beat here. Not quite seeing the EPS numbers just yet here, but at least on the top line certainly looks like a beat, guys. Here's your forecast, your fourth quarter revenue forecast. The company providing a range of $9.9 to $10.1 billion. Street was looking for roughly about 10.1, so the top end of that range pretty much in line with the average of street estimates.
All right, little movement to the downside on Salesforce, just down about 1%. Check this one out. Let's bring up the aftermarket and Okta, because it is soaring in the aftermarket. This is the mobile identification, security, multi-factor authentication company coming out with its numbers. Let's go right to the outlook. Fourth quarter revenue, they're looking at $667 million to $669 million. That's above the street estimate of $650.7 million. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS, they're looking for a range of 73 to 74. Not really quite a range, but well above the estimate, which is 67 cents on the street. And again, they're looking for fiscal year revenue of $2.6 billion. They had seen 2.56 to 2.57, so upping that up just a little bit. And that stock up 17% in the aftermarket. It had been down about 10% here in 2024. But if that holds into tomorrow's session, we'll see that stock move into positive territory for 2024.
Well, quite a move from Okta right now, higher by 16%. Salesforce not moving much. I'm just looking through the press release right now to get some commentary from Mark Benioff, chair and CEO over at Salesforce, talking, of course, about AI and Agentforce, the complete AI system for enterprises that is built into the Salesforce platform. He says that, quote, the rise of autonomous AI agents is revolutionizing global labor, reshaping how industries operate and scale. And with Agentforce, we're not just witnessing the future, we're leading it, unleashing a new era of digital labor for every business and every industry. That's a quote from Mark Benioff in the press release. I'm still waiting to see what that actually looks like and how companies are able to save money and become more efficient with use of AI. I think a lot of investors are as well. Salesforce right now up about 0.7%.
And we have a little more detail on Salesforce's outlook too. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS will be $2.57 to $2.62. That is lower than the consensus estimate of $2.65. And of course, this is a stock that has climbed 27% since its last quarterly earnings. So it's got quite a bit priced into it on that excitement over those AI agents. We also have some headlines on Campbell's, the soup company, or the once upon a time just soup company. It has boosted its quarterly dividend by about 5%. And it also reported results. First quarter adjusted EPS, 89 cents, beating the consensus estimate by 2 cents. Net sales, $2.77 billion, does fall short of the analyst estimate of $2.8 billion. For the full year, it sees net sales of 9% to 11%, which looks to be a maintenance, reiterating its forecast for what it saw for full year sales.
All right, we're also waiting for Marvell Technologies. That should come out any moment as well. Again, looking at the AI read-through from there. Going back to Salesforce for a moment, because I wanted to look at that forecast in terms of the fourth quarter. It's looking at revenue estimates anywhere from 9.9 to 10.10 billion. That looks like a beat from what current estimates were. Adjusted earnings estimate coming in at $2.57 to $2.62. That's a little bit lighter than what's estimated, but that stock now reflecting that upside over 4% and 3%, because a lot of these numbers look super, super solid.
And it's kind of interesting, too, when you talk about the contribution from AI on the total revenue stack, and they don't really sort of explicitly break that down, but you can see that sort of reflected in the subscription and support revenue. Definitely a little bit of a boost, and you talk about this whole, AI, agent thing that they're trying to roll out here, and this general idea that when we look at sort of the big upswing that we've seen in AI-related stock, it has been confined to chip makers like NVIDIA. It's been confined to cloud computing companies like Microsoft. The big question is this the time now where investors embrace the software side of this story?
All right, guys, Marvell Technology also out with its earnings. Third quarter adjusted EPS, 43 cents. That's 2 pennies better than the street was expecting. Third quarter loss per share, 78 cents versus a loss share year over year of 19 cents. So we'll look for some clarity around that. Marvell Technology up 7%. So investors seem to like what they're hearing initially on these brief headlines. Third quarter net revenue, $1.52 billion. That too was better than what the street was forecasting. The street was looking for about $1.45 billion. And here's something into the outlook. Marvell Technology sees fourth quarter adjusted EPS of 54 to 64 cents. And folks, that's above the street estimate of 52 cents. So yeah, that stock's up 10% here in the aftermarket.
Matt Murphy, the chairman and CEO of Marvell, saying that the exceptional performance in the third quarter is primarily driven by our custom AI silicon programs, which are now in volume production, further augmented by robust ongoing demand from cloud customers for our market-leading interconnect products. I bring up his name because he's one of the names that could potentially be a new CEO over at Intel. Our Bloomberg News team reporting a little earlier today that the search for a new Intel CEO is focusing on outsiders. And Matt Murphy over at Marvell, one of the names that is being floated. Shares up 10% now.
And of course, investors continue to search for opportunities in the AI and in the tech space.